right, Sip and Talkers, welcome back. Go on, take a sip of whatever you've got.
Please do.
Because you're really going to need to have your calm dialed all the way up for today.
Yeah, this one is a lot. The state of tech and, global affairs in 2025 feels like a movie script that's accelerating way too fast.
It totally does. On one side, you've got OpenAI basically screaming, "Oh, I'm stuck." And then Google just strolls in like, I just leveled up.
It's like the AI version of Game of Thrones, seriously.
Thanks.
So let's just lay out the facts. OpenAI has openly admitted that they're scaling law. This idea that more power equals more smarts, it's hit a wall. They keep adding compute power and the models just get weirder.
And while it's happening, Google comes out of nowhere with Gemini 3 and just blows past them, especially in this super critical area of handling huge, complex code libraries.
Mm-hmm. And the funniest part, Google finally forced its two rival AI divisions, DeepMind and Google Brain, to merge.
Ah, the internal civil war.
Exactly. And it's like the whole company went to therapy, worked out its issues, and now their combined strength is just surging. It's one of the biggest stories right now.
It really is.
Yeah. And then you listen to Sam Altman's recent interviews, and it sounds a lot like, look, we might have to burn through $100 billion, but don't panic. The second we hit AGI, we make it all back.
I mean, that is a bolder pitch than anything I ever heard back in my Silicon Valley days.
Unbelievable.
But not surprising, right? Google's sitting on, what, $70 billion in free cash flow a year?
Over $70 billion, yeah.
So OpenAI's spending spree is like someone renting an apartment trying to out-earn their landlord who owns the whole block.
That's a perfect analogy. And then, as if that's not enough drama, on the other side of the world, U.S.-China relations are just as tense. We've got Trump and Xi on the phone, a huge debate about whether to sell them advanced chips.
And this question of do we want China dependent on U.S. tech or not, all happening at once.
To put it bluntly, you've got AI giants fighting an internal war, you've got superpowers in an external one, and then you have Japan and China in this, cold, passive-aggressive stare-down.
If you just started paying attention to the news, you'd think the world is speeding toward the series finale.
Right.
And don't forget, in the middle of all this, Elon Musk drops this bombshell in an interview that, in the future, none of us are going to need to work anymore.
Are we all about to be unemployed? Is that what he's saying?
Well, you want to find out.
I think we have to.
Today, we're going to break it all down for you. We're going to look at the seismic shift happening in the AI industry and what Musk really envisions.
Then we'll get into the strategic chess game between the U.S., China, and Japan, what they said and what they really meant.
And finally, the deep fundamental tension between Taiwan and China, the latest narratives and the core of the sovereignty debate.
And here's the thing. These aren't separate stories. They are three plot lines converging in real time.
Okay, everybody, take one last sip.
Let's get into it.
Let's start with this AI inflection point. For anyone not, deep in the weeds of AI development, what does it actually mean when we say the scaling law broke down for OpenAI? Why is that such a big deal?
It's a huge deal because it's basically a crisis of their entire philosophy. The scaling law was their North Star.
Right.
It was this core belief that if you just keep making the model bigger, feed it more data, and throw more computers at it, intelligence will just emerge. It would reliably get smarter. And, it worked spectacularly for GPT-3 and GPT-4. It's why they were so far ahead.
It sounds kind of like the Industrial Revolution model for AI, just build a bigger factory, get a better result.
That's exactly what it was. But then, as Sam Altman admitted, when they tried to scale up to the level of a GPT-5, they ran into big trouble. The intelligence gains just slowed to a crawl, and instead they started getting these bizarre, unexplainable, weird errors.
What are people in the community saying? What are the theories about why they hit this wall?
Well, there are a few big ones floating around. The first, and maybe the most obvious, is that they've literally run out of high-quality training data on the public internet.
So we've mined all the good stuff, and now we're just left with digital sludge.
Pretty much. The second theory is that the underlying architecture, the transformer model itself, might just have a ceiling. It's incredibly efficient, but maybe it's not built for infinite conceptual growth. And third, those weird errors suggest that as you scale, you're not just amplifying the signal, you're also amplifying the noise, the bias, all the junk data. It's like turning up the volume on a scratchy record. It just gets louder, not clearer.
That is a terrible spot to be in for the company that basically started this whole race.
Yeah.
And right at that moment, Google just smashes through that wall with Gemini 3. Where did they find the breakthrough?
They found it by being laser focused on two things: optimizing their architecture, and this is the critical part, specializing in code. Their counterattack was so strong because Gemini 3 showed this incredible ability to handle massive, complex code libraries. We're talking huge, multi-file software projects.
And why is mastering code the key to market dominance here?
Because that's where the money is right now. AI that can write, debug, and maintain industrial-scale software isn't just a cool toy. It's an essential productivity tool that every Fortune 500 company will pay a premium for.
It's an immediate revenue driver.
Immediately. If Gemini 3 does that better than GPT-4, Google gets this massive, stable income stream. Altman basically had to concede that Google found a more efficient path. Maybe they have better data, maybe a new architectural trick. But whatever it is, they figured out how to keep getting smarter with scale where OpenAI got stuck.
Which brings us to the money. The financial war chest. Because this feels like it's becoming less about the tech and more about who can afford to stay in the game. OpenAI's $100 billion bet. That sounds incredibly risky.
It's a staggering number, and it really highlights how much they depend on outside investors. They are planning to burn through $100 billion just to reach AGI, or human-level intelligence. That kind of debt creates this immense pressure to deliver something world-changing.
$100 billion. I mean, that's bigger than the entire market cap of some major global banks.
Yeah.
What's the thinking behind taking on that kind of pressure?
It's what some are calling a dimension gamble.
Okay.
Altman's entire strategy is built on this one article of faith. They only need to achieve true AGI one single day before Google or anyone else.
Just one day.
If they do that, if they win that race, all the debt, all the technical problems, all the market pressure, it all vanishes overnight. They would effectively have a monopoly on the most valuable invention in human history. It's an all-or-nothing moonshot.
And you contrast that with Google, which has this, I mean, you called it a financial moat. It's more like an ocean.
It really is. Google is the stable incumbent. They brought in over $70 billion in free cash flow in the last year. For them, the AI race isn't an existential gamble. It's just an expense.
Oh.
It's a line item on their budget, covered by the massive, reliable profits from search and cloud. They can afford to invest regardless of cost for the long haul. OpenAI just can't match that.
So to go back to our earlier analogy, OpenAI has this rented body. They're the hot startup, but they don't own any of their own infrastructure.
That is their single biggest structural weakness. They are completely dependent on leasing cloud services, mostly from Microsoft, and buying incredibly expensive GPUs from NVIDIA.
Yeah.
Every single time they train a new model, the meter is running.
Whereas Google owns the whole stack.
The entire vertical ecosystem. Let's break that down for a second because it's so important.
Yeah, let's. They design their own chips, the TPUs. How much of an edge does that give them over just buying NVIDIA GPUs like everyone else?
It's a massive edge. TPUs, or tensor processing units, are custom built for one thing: machine learning. NVIDIA's GPUs are amazing, but they're general-purpose tools that have been adapted for AI.
So they're more efficient.
Way more efficient. Because Google designs them in-house and plugs them directly into their own cloud, they get better performance, they use significantly less power, and they have lower latency. This means Google can build and test new models faster and cheaper than OpenAI ever could. It's a huge advantage in speed and cost.
So they've got the hardware, the cloud, the distribution through Android and search, and all the data from those services. They can weave AI into their products in a way OpenAI can only dream of.
Precisely. And you're starting to see the market wake up to this. Investors are getting a little tired of the dream premium, valuing companies on the promise of AGI someday while they're burning cash today.
Right.
They're starting to shift back towards Google's stability, their proven path to actually making money from AI through the products we already use. It's just a safer bet.
Now, this turnaround at Google wasn't just a tech thing. It took a really big leadership move from the CEO, Sundar Pichai.
It did, and it was long overdue. He finally forced the merger of Google Brain and DeepMind. For years, these were two of the best AI labs in the world, but they were inside the same company, fighting each other for money, for talent, for glory. It was slowing everything down.
Like having two brilliant but feuding science departments in the same university.
Exactly. The merger finally got everyone on the same page, ended the internal politics, and created a single unified team. You just can't build something as complex as Gemini 3 without that.
And they also spent a ton of money to bring back a key founder, right?
They reported $3 billion to rehire Noam Shazir. He was instrumental in the Gemini 3 turnaround. It just proves that brilliant engineering and smart management are way more important than just blindly throwing more computers at a problem.
So when the dust settles, we're probably not looking at one winner takes all. It's more likely a split market. kind of like we've seen before in tech history.
Yeah, the thinking is it's going to look a lot like the old Apple versus Microsoft rivalry.
Okay, so who's who?
OpenAI, assuming they survive their $100 billion bet, is probably the Apple in this scenario. You know, very specialized, premium, elegant, but expensive. They'll serve the high-end professional and creative markets through a fancy API.
And Google becomes the new Microsoft.
Exactly. Google's superpower is integration. They'll make AI cheap, stable, and basically invisible. It'll be baked boringly into Gmail, Docs, Maps, and Search. It becomes a utility, like electricity, not some revolutionary new product you have to buy.
That's a really subtle but powerful strategy. It kind of avoids all the scary headlines and regulatory fights.
And the company that quietly and safely integrates AI into a billion people's lives is the one that wins the long game.
It's the classic pioneer's fate, isn't it? The disruptor blazes the trail, but the established giant with all the infrastructure comes in and reaps the harvest.
The age of pure AI discovery is kind of ending, and the age of industrial-scale AI efficiency is just beginning.
And that efficiency, that massive leap in productivity, that leads us right to these huge visionary predictions from people like Elon Musk and NVIDIA's Jensen Huang.
Yeah, let's go there. Let's move from the corporate battle to the existential future. Musk's prediction that work itself will become optional is, it's just mind-bending. What's his timeline on that?
He thinks it's a long-term thing, maybe 10 to 20 years out. His belief is that AGI, and especially advanced robotics, will create such an abundance of labor, both physical and mental, that working for survival just won't be a thing anymore.
So work becomes a hobby.
Pretty much, like gardening or painting.
Wow.
Something you do because you enjoy it and it gives you meaning, not because you need a paycheck to buy food.
Wow, that just upends the entire foundation of modern society. Our self-worth is so deeply tied to our economic output.
Completely. And he sees humanoid robots as the key to this. Musk actually predicts that humanoid robots will be the single largest industry ever. Bigger than cars, bigger than phones.
And his logic is?
It's actually very pragmatic. He says that AI and robotics are the only practical way to eliminate global poverty. You can provide cheap, abundant, tireless labor for every single task imaginable, from farming to manufacturing to healthcare.
Okay, so if Musk is looking 10 or 20 years down the road to optional work, what's Jensen Huang's take on the more immediate future, like the next 5 years?
Huang has a much more, I'd say, grounded, near-term view. He agrees AI is going to change how everyone works, but he pushes back hard against the idea of immediate mass unemployment. He sees AI as an amplifier.
An amplifier of human ability.
Exactly. He thinks it'll make all the difficult, repetitive, slow parts of our jobs much, much easier. And this will free up professionals, especially people whose jobs are based on ideas like scientists, doctors, engineers, to become busier and way more productive.
So his example is a radiologist, right?
Yeah, a radiologist might be able to read 5 times as many scans with an AI assistant. It doesn't replace them, it allows them to treat 5 times more patients. AI multiplies the output of our creative and intellectual work.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. The people who use their brains the most are just going to get busier, not become obsolete.
Right. The value shifts from doing the task to coming up with the idea for the task.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so from labor on Earth, let's pivot to computing in space. This part of the research sounded like straight-up science fiction, but you're saying it's actually becoming an engineering problem we need to solve.
It's totally driven by physics. The amount of energy future AI systems are going to need is just insane. It's growing so fast that we're literally hitting the physical limits of what planet Earth can provide in terms of power, and just as importantly, cooling.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
The goal for true AGI is something like 300 terawatts of computation per year. That's nearly 2/3 of the entire average power consumption of the United States. It's not sustainable.
We would literally melt our data centers and crash the power grid. So space is the solution for power and getting rid of heat.
That's the idea. Space gives you 3 huge advantages. First, you get continuous 247 solar power. No clouds, no night. That means you don't need massive, heavy, expensive batteries, which is a huge cost saver.
And the solar panels themselves are cheaper up there.
That's the second advantage. You don't need heavy glass and frames to protect them from weather, so they're much lighter and cheaper to launch. But the third advantage is probably the most important: cooling.
Right.
In the vacuum of space, heat just radiates away. It's way more efficient than here on Earth, where we need these enormous, power-hungry air conditioning and liquid cooling systems.
So solar-powered AI satellites become the cheapest way to do computation.
Musk thinks that will be true within 5 years. And if the cheapest computation moves to space, then, computing power becomes a geopolitical asset literally floating over our heads. It completely changes the conversation about data sovereignty.
And we're already seeing countries jockeying for position to build this AI infrastructure back on the ground. Saudi Arabia is making some huge moves.
Oh, this is a major strategic play. The Saudis are partnering with big U.S. tech firms, investing just massive amounts of capital, energy, and land to build these giant AI factories, robotics labs, EV plants.
And NVIDIA is involved.
NVIDIA's right in the middle of it, including a 500-megawatt project with Musk's xAI. It just shows you that strategic positioning in AI is now driving international relations. It's the new nexus of capital, energy, and technology.
The AI wars aren't just in Silicon Valley anymore. They're shaping global alliances and capital flows, which is the perfect bridge to our next topic, the geopolitical tension in the U.S.-China-Japan triangle.
It's a seamless transition because the key that connects the tech wars to Asian political stability is the sale of these advanced AI chips. And it all starts with this recent phone call between President Trump and President Xi.
It's always so fascinating to read the official readouts of these calls. They're so carefully crafted to send very specific messages.
Totally. So what was the U.S. side emphasizing? What was Trump's focus?
The U.S. focus was very transactional, very business-focused. The statements were all about trade, maybe lowering those 10% tariffs, getting rare earth minerals flowing again, and cooperating on the fentanyl crisis.
So a very deliberate effort to avoid the big sensitive sovereignty issues.
Exactly. The American readout wanted to signal one thing: positive momentum on the economic relationship. Let's make a deal.
And China. What were Xi's non-negotiables?
China's statement was the complete opposite. It was all about core sovereignty. They focused on two things: Taiwan and Ukraine. She made this point that Taiwan's return is a fundamental part of the post-World War II international order.
So he's framing their claim in historical legal terms.
And then, crucially, they used the Ukraine issue as a lever. They basically warned the U.S. against supporting Ukraine's sovereignty, trying to draw a parallel and say, if you support their integrity, you can't infringe on ours regarding Taiwan.
That is a brilliant piece of political jujitsu. It weaponizes the West's moral support for Ukraine against its position on Taiwan.
It absolutely does. It puts the U.S. in this position of having to confront a potential hypocrisy, advocating for territorial integrity in Europe while challenging it in Asia.
And this brings us right to the immediate high-stakes decision on President Trump's desk. This whole dilemma about selling NVIDIA's H200 chips to China, this is a purely strategic choice with billions of dollars on the line.
It really is. The decision forces the U.S. to pick between two completely different, competing grand strategies for dealing with China's tech rise.
Okay, let's break those two options down. Option one is what we could call the dependency strategy.
Right. The dependency strategy says, sell them the advanced chips. The logic is that you keep China hooked on the U.S. tech ecosystem, specifically on NVIDIA's software and hardware. If all of China's best engineers are trained on the NVIDIA platform, the U.S. can always use that as leverage later on.
Pull the rug out from under them if they have to.
Exactly. And of course, NVIDIA loves this option because they want the revenue.
And then there's option two, the containment strategy.
Which is ban the sale. The goal here is to maintain America's long-term technological lead. By cutting off access to the best U.S. tech, you force China to spend billions trying to develop its own, probably inferior domestic technology, like from Huawei. The hope is that this preserves the U.S. lead forever, even if it means NVIDIA loses out on sales today.
So it's the ultimate trade-off. Short-term profit and influence versus long-term security and dominance. That is an impossible choice for any president.
And China's not just sitting around waiting. They're already hedging against this.
How so?
They're pushing their own domestic champions. Even though everyone knows NVIDIA's H200 is far superior to anything China can make right now, Beijing is heavily encouraging, maybe even forcing companies to use domestic chips from places like Huawei.
So it's a two-pronged strategy for them.
Right. First, it ensures they have a backup plan if the U.S. cuts them off completely. And second, it pumps money into their own domestic industry, trying to catch up in the long run.
Now let's move to the third point on this triangle. The tension between China and Japan. Beijing is really turning up the pressure on Tokyo.
Yeah, they're using a lot of these economic coercion tactics. It's a way of showing displeasure without, starting a military conflict. They use harsh rhetoric. They cut back on tourist groups.
Which actually cost Japan's economy a lot of money, right?
Over $13 million a year, yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll also delay or cancel the release of Japanese cultural products, movies, music, things like that.
These are all little economic jabs designed to pressure the Japanese government, probably about its close military ties with the U.S. But what's Japan's biggest economic vulnerability when it comes to China?
It's their reliance on China for key raw materials, specifically rare earth elements. Japan is a technological superpower, but it is critically dependent on China for these minerals.
And just remind us, why are rare earths so vital for Japan's economy?
They're absolutely essential for their high-tech manufacturing. You need them for high-efficiency EV batteries, for robotics, for advanced optics, for military hardware. If China ever decided to cut off the supply of rare earths, it could cripple Japan's most valuable industries, like their automotive sector.
Which explains why, right after that Trump-Xi call, there was an immediate follow-up call between Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi Sane.
That coordination was essential. It was about making sure the Japanese government was fully read in on the conversation with Xi, and it served as a very public reaffirmation of the U.S.-Japan security alliance, a necessary show of solidarity to push back against Beijing's pressure campaign.
And all of this, all 3 points of this triangle, they all pivot around the most sensitive issue in the entire region, the Taiwan question. We have to look at the competing claims here, objectively.
Yeah, and to do that, you have to go back into the history that informs the PRC's entire narrative.
So let's start with their core assertion, that Taiwan's return is just unfinished business from World War II. What are they basing that on?
They point to 2 key documents from that era. The first is the 1943 Cairo Declaration, where the Allied powers, including the Republic of China, or ROC, agreed that territories Japan had stolen from China, like Taiwan, would be returned after the war.
Okay.
And the second is the 1945 Potsdam Proclamation, which just reaffirmed the terms of the Cairo Declaration. So from Beijing's perspective, the mandate to return Taiwan to China is baked into the very framework that ended World War II.
They see it as the last loose end of the Chinese Civil War, not as a dispute between 2 separate countries.
Exactly. And that view was, in their minds, solidified in 1971 by UN General Assembly Resolution 2758, which recognized the PRC as the sole legitimate government of China and kicked the ROC out of the UN.
But the democratic government in Taiwan, the Republic of China, they have their own very powerful counterargument.
Theirs is a historical and a moral one. The ROC was founded in 1912. It was Asia's first republic, a key ally in World War II. Their counter-narrative is, wait a minute, we hold the historical mandate, and we have a democracy. The question shouldn't be about us returning to communist China, but why shouldn't communist China return to the democratic ROC?
They see the PRC as the rebel faction that took over the mainland.
Right. But that vision, however compelling, is just. It's constrained by the reality of raw power. The PRC's military and economy are just so much larger, and most countries in the world, for pragmatic reasons, adhere to the one China policy, even if they maintain unofficial ties with Taiwan.
And this leads us to the absolute core of Taiwan's anxiety. It's not about names or flags, it's a fear of total elimination.
That is the deep, nonpartisan fear you hear from everyone in Taiwan, articulated by their Mainland Affairs Council. They believe the PRC's final goal isn't partnership, it's the complete elimination of the Republic of China as a political entity.
So they see all the official language from Beijing, phrases like one country, 2 systems, or peaceful unification, as just strategic buzzwords for a transitional phase.
They see them as tools to quiet down international opposition while the PRC built up its power. But they believe the end goal has always been annexation and the complete erasure of Taiwan's democracy, its military, its diplomatic presence, everything.
And they believe this because they've seen the pattern play out before in other regions under PRC control.
The historical precedent is just. It's undeniable. You see this pattern of moving from initial promises of a high degree of autonomy to eventual political and cultural erasure. The most obvious example is Hong Kong.
Right.
The promise was 50 years unchanged under one country, 2 systems. But the national security law and the changes to their electoral system effectively ended any meaningful political autonomy long before that 50-year mark.
And what about policies in other border regions like Xinjiang or Tibet?
In those regions, you see a clear push towards forced cultural assimilation. In Inner Mongolia, there are new policies that erode native language education. And in Xinjiang and Tibet, you have these severe human rights concerns, mass surveillance, all aimed at stamping out distinct local and religious identities.
So for Taiwan, the chilling implication is that unification just means one system under one party rule. Full stop.
If that pattern holds, then unification would require them to erase their democratic institutions, give up their military, abandon their constitution. This is why their government sees it not as a political disagreement, but as a fight for the survival or extinction of their entire way of life.
It really highlights why maintaining this very delicate, very complicated status quo is so important for the whole region.
This status quo of no unification, no independence, and no use of force has, against all odds, prevented a major war since the 1990s. And this is despite the fact that their economies are deeply intertwined. Over 40% of Taiwan's exports go to the mainland.
And the risk if anyone tries to force a change.
The risk is catastrophic. A forced return in either direction would trigger a crisis on the scale of the Ukraine war, or worse. You have to remember, Taiwan produces 60% of the world's advanced semiconductors. The global economy would grind to a halt overnight.
And that's why these leader-to-leader calls, like the Trump-Xi'an, are so critical. They're about keeping the lines of communication open to preserve that fragile peace.
Exactly.
Okay, so we went from a high-stakes tech gamble in Silicon Valley to a dangerous geopolitical tightrope walk in Asia. That was quite a journey.
The synthesis is pretty clear, though. The fight over who gets the latest AI chip is directly connected to the stability of Taiwan. And the success of that very technology is what's forcing us to ask this deep existential question: who are we when we don't have to work anymore?
We've seen that to really understand what's happening today, you need to grasp the technical details of TPUs, the historical context of the Cairo Declaration, and have the personal discipline to just put your phone down and be still for a minute.
We covered a lot of ground today, and we really tried to give you the granular detail you need to make sense of this incredibly complex moment in history.
So I'll leave you with one final thought to chew on. If Elon Musk is right, if work really does become optional in the next decade or two, the biggest challenge for all of us won't be finding a new job. It will be unlearning the deeply ingrained belief that our productivity is what makes us worthy.
If you could hit pause on your life right now, what part of the endless preparation for the future would you just stop? What would you do today? Because life is happening right now, in this moment.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to Sip&Talk wherever you get your podcasts.
And please go check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife. He's got fun memes and some great new travel vlogs, and we hear that traveling slowly is the ultimate rebellion against the cult of productivity.
We will catch you next time.
Until then, stay curious.